Yes, sir.
Question going back to Halliburton issue. Are states still non-challenging the federal government Clean Water Act now, where the state feels their interests are at risk? Fracking is being done in a reckless way.
So his question was, given what we now know about the pollution that is caused by fracking, are not the states trying to take control of the legal regulatory system back from the feds? And I'm going to answer in probably an unsatisfying way and say that I think it's worth acknowledging the complexity of the fracking question. So now think about this. 9/11 happens and the whole world gets spun out of whack. And one of the first things we did besides invade the wrong country was we decided that we would try to become energy independent. We would try to find sources of energy that didn't require us to go to the Middle East. And one thing we came up with was finding all this natural gas. So one of the problems with getting rid of fracking is that it actually has solved one problem. It has solved the problem of getting all our energy from, an unstable, volatile part of the world. So when people say we need fracking, I actually understand what they're saying at a geopolitical level. But in terms of the environment, it's very difficult to, or I should say, given that, it's very difficult for the environmental argument to hold sway, because they'll say, we need to get rid of fracking or regulate fracking. They'll say, what do you want to go back to Middle Eastern oil again? And that's actually an effective argument. I mean, that's a difficult thing for an environmentalist to answer. The short answer is that as far as I know, the states have not been very successful at unwinding an existing fracking industry. Pennsylvania, the horse is way out of the barn. In New York, though, Governor Cuomo is doing more to try to regulate it. Part of it is because he has consumers of fracking energy. He doesn't have producers of it. It's the states where the producers, the industries exist that have the most difficult time, because the industry holds more power in the political channels than consumers do. So in Maryland, Maryland is a funny place, because in Maryland we have a tiny, tiny fraction of the state where you could frack if you wanted to. We have, on the other hand, Baltimore, where a great deal of the fracked gas is piped so that we can then ship it overseas. One of the great things about fracking to be aware of is that a lot of the gas that we're fracking is being shipped. It's not being used by the United States. So it's a great profit maker, but it also is supporting the shipping industry. And Baltimore, as you probably have read in the last month, has had a lot of problems economically. So you have a new industry that is built on shipping fractured gas overseas. So if you say in Maryland we want to get rid of fracking, you might have a real problem, not with the fracking companies, but with the shipping companies. So there's all kinds of complexity here. The short answer is, as far as I know, there's been no successful pushback. Where it has not yet happened, there's some resistance, but it has not been rolled back yet, and I don't foresee that happening. Yeah?
How is it that we ship 80 to 90% of fracking gas overseas we are now? How is it if we are shipping 80 to 90% of this fracking gas overseas, we are now energy independent?
I don't know. I can't answer that. Maybe it's because we have so much of it that we're just able to use it and then ship the excess that we're not using. I just know that what you've just said is a fact. Yeah, go ahead.
I know no one in here drinks sodas, but for the people who are out there who still drink sodas, do you know if they're still putting the same ingredients that make up the flame retardant in the drinking sodas? I won't name any name of the sodas, but do you know if they're still putting them in the sodas?
If anyone knows precisely which chemicals she's talking about, I'd like to know. Brominated vegetable oil? The question is, are they using flame retardant chemicals in sodas? And someone said brominated vegetable oil, which I have to tell you is news to me. I don't know about that.
Yeah.
I do know that sodas...
It's Fresca, Gatorade, and Mountain Dew.
Okay, well, thank you. That would be something to look into. You should probably speak to her. I will tell you that you are getting GMO corn in your sodas because of the high fructose corn syrup. And as you heard earlier today, also probably GMO sugar beets to get the sugar. So I don't know about the flame retardants, but you're definitely getting GMOs in your soda. That's for sure.
Thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, so we have these BPA-free plastic bottles and the craziness around BPA-free. So it's just one thing, right? So it's still not healthy. It's just one chemical in.
Right, so it's BPA-free. It's not chemical-free. And I will tell you, I can only tell you a little bit about this, but there is new evidence starting to trickle out that the chemicals that replaced BPA are also not entirely benign. So, right. I mean, the point is that you can get away from all that by not drinking out of a plastic bottle. Do you know, I mean, it's kind of like, replacing one chemical with another chemical is never going to get you out of the problem. The way to get out of the problem is just not to use the plastic bottle. You see what I mean? Like, there's no way to, like, incrementally step your way away. You just got to chuck the whole thing.
Does that mean also, like, plastic forks and spoons?
I mean, you can keep yourself up all night thinking about the ways that you're dependent on plastics. I think the general answer is do your best to get rid of as much of it as you can as he drinks his water.
I buy small mason jars, and I carry my water around with me wherever in small mason jars. It's not that hard. You filter your water at home, and you carry small glass mason jars. You have no idea how much it would save you and the environment just doing that one simple thing.
Yeah, I think, just try some experiments at home with things like that. Like, just try to carry a plastic bag around for a week and tally up the number of plastic bottles that you personally consume. And you might be horrified. I mean, even if you think of yourself as a relatively green person, you might be surprised how much you generate. It's become so invisible and so convenient that we don't even see it anymore. So that's worth thinking about. Yeah, please, go ahead.
Are there any plastics, especially like for kids? We're in Florida, so we are big into Tervis tumblers just because they don't break. Any of that any good?
Look, I'm just an English professor. What can I tell you? I don't know. I'm also not a purist. I mean, I come up here and I take a purist line just for argument's sake, but, the reality is it's very difficult to get away from this, and I acknowledge that. I do think that becoming more educated about the whole picture is worth doing so that you can make better choices each time you make a choice. And you'd actually be surprised over the course of a day how many times you have a choice to make. So I'm not going to sit here and list good products versus bad products. I would just say that if you can, one of the early chapters in this book talks about this whole, you guys know about this whole concept of mindfulness. This is like a Buddhist meditation thing. But mindfulness is like, instead of reacting all day long, just reacting, you actually sort of think about it and say, normally I buy this, but maybe I'll take a breath and I'll think about it for a second and then choose something different. And the best example of this, real quick, and I'll get to your question, is laundry detergents. So you may ask yourself, why is it that you use the laundry detergent that you use? And oftentimes the answer is incredibly unconscious. You use a laundry detergent because your mother used that laundry detergent. Maybe her mother used that laundry detergent before her. It turns out that's not an accident. For those of you who were English majors or French majors and read Proust, you know that, like, the way that memory is stored in your sense of smell is well documented, right? So smells generate all kinds of memories, right? So the people that make these products like laundry detergent, they know that using Tide brings up sentimental, nostalgic memories for you. So you think, I remember the way my sheets used to smell when I was a kid. I'm going to have them smell the same way. So you buy the same product. In other words, you walk into the supermarket, and either your eyes or your nose are telling you, must buy this, must buy this, must buy this. So you buy that without thinking about it. When you find out that Tide may not be the ideal laundry detergent, maybe you could take a breath and say, my kids are growing up on 7th generation instead, or something. And they'll get all nostalgic about a plant-based product, just as an example. Yeah.
Back to the plastic. EcoZenith is one of the sponsors of this conference, and we make an alternative to plastic that's 100% natural and 100% compostable. And so please come to our booth and take a look at some options that we think could completely replace plastic.
Thank you. Let me reinforce that. Great idea. I'm glad you mentioned that because I was going to say something. One of the chapters in the book, as I said, is based on Maine and how all the angry moms up in Maine beat back these multinationals. Now, Maine is a place that is very poor. It's very rural and it's very poor. There used to be a booming potato industry in northern Maine in a place called Aroostook County, had a booming potato industry. But when McDonald's decided to buy all their potatoes from one place in Idaho, that potato industry went bust. But it turns out that you can make a lot of stuff out of potatoes. Your products may be made out of corn, I guess, but it turns out you can make plastic out of potatoes. Now imagine this. What if you could take all those out-of-work potato farmers and say, go back to making potatoes, and we'll turn those potatoes into plastic cups or plastic bottles or plastic computer frames or whatever you're going to make out of plastic, you can make out of potatoes, just like you can make them out of petrochemicals. Right? If there was a big kind of research push into that sort of thing, these natural versions, plastic just means something that can be synthesized into make many different kinds of products. You don't just have to make them out of petrochemicals, as you well know. So there are all kinds of potential future roads to travel, not just the one that we've been on. Yes, please.
How dangerous it is to freeze the water in the bottle?
How dangerous did you say?
Yes, to freeze the water in the bottle like this.
To freeze the water?
Yeah, put it in the freezer.
So then when it melts, you then drink it? Is that what you mean?
Yes.
You know what? I'm only going to speculate. When I said earlier that you've got room temperature water and you've got hot water, and hot water makes the plastic leach faster, I would just assume that cold water makes it leach slower. So I don't know this, but I would not be surprised if you're getting a slower leaching of the water into the frozen water. But on the other hand, how long has that water been in that bottle before you bought it? Do we know? A week? A year? Who knows, right? The plastic has been leaking into the water as long as the water has been in the bottle. So whether you freeze it or heat it may, in the end, have no consequence. Do you know what I mean? It's like, I don't know if you know this, but apparently when you eat a fast food hamburger, the meat in the hamburger has been dead for a year. Now, not that you need any more reasons not to eat fast food, but there's another reason. You know this story, science teachers will show their students, they'll take a quarter pounder and they'll stick it on the windowsill, and a year later it'll still be there, and the reason is there's not enough nutrition to support bacteria. It's like the thing won't even decompose. So anyway, go ahead.
Have you heard of a company called Melaleuca?
Mm-hmm.
If you do you recommend their products? They
Melaleuca.
say they make chemical-free household cleaners.
Sure. Well, I think Melaleuca makes the actual chemical Melaleuca, the Melaleuca tree from Australia, I think, produces, what does it produce? Tea tree oil. The tea tree oil, tea tree oil can be used for all kinds. So that's an example of a natural ingredient that can be used all kinds of ways, just like, lemon juice and vinegar. All these natural things that you can use to clean everything. Yes, the answer is let's say I don't know about the company, but the ingredients are more benign than the petrochemicals, I think. Go ahead.
I only use vinegar and baking soda in my house, and it cleans everything. You don't have to buy another thing.
Right. It turns out that people were able to clean their houses before they came up with petrochemicals, right? It's amazing that was true. It's like people say, there's no way we could feed the world using organic farming. It's like, 100 years ago, there was no other kind. So it's just it's a funny thing. Go ahead.
I also have chemical sensitivity, and I'm just saying from my experience, I feel like I'm the canary in the coal mine. Unfortunately, I might be the future of some people. Even laundry detergents that are fairly pure, I think you also have to get out the fragrances, because a lot of the fragrances have chemicals too. So the most pure kind of laundry detergents and things like that you can get are chemical-free in all ways, including fragrances.
That's a very important thing.
Fragrances are a big issue.
Fragrances, and you'll see products that list fragrances on the bottom, and it doesn't tell you anything more than that word. The word fragrance has no meaning in any chemical sense. This book, Poison Spring, which I will tell you, Valianato's there, he was the EPA guy. All I did was rewrite this book. I took his data and his research and paper trail and turned this thing into this book. But he talks about things like fragrances, and also if you see a product that it'll have list of active ingredients, and it'll be like a fraction of a percent, and then it'll say inactive, and it'll name it. Active ingredient equals this, and then it'll say inactive ingredients 98%, but it won't tell you what they are. Turns out that those inactive ingredients can be more toxic than the active ingredients, but again, because of this regulatory system, they don't have to list what they are, or test them for that matter. So when you see something as like largely inactive, that means virtually nothing, and sometimes even the opposite of what you think it means. So for whatever it's worth, this may be a very frustrating kind of summation to say, but a lot of this stuff is really about trying to figure out ways to get better information. Because all of us would make better choices if we had better information. And oftentimes, it's only information that we're lacking. If we had information, we could choose this or that. But if we have no information, these things seem to be equal. And if we have only information provided by the company selling product A and no information selling product B, if we're bombarded by marketing for product A, we'll tend to buy product A. So this is really a question. This is true for chemicals, it's true for pesticides, it's true for GMOs, it's true for all kinds of things. The more information we have, the better. Because we're all educated consumers, and we can make better choices if we have information to go on. So when you see a lot of these industries saying, don't push us to label, that's a really obnoxious point of view, because what they're saying is, trust us to give you the stuff that we think is okay. And I think that's really, it's at least condescending, if not somewhat worse than that. Yeah?
So should we stop fertilizing our lawns totally?
Well, do you want to have this conversation? So what is it, let's just speak generically. Should we stop fertilizing our lawns? One question would be, like, what does your lawn represent to you? Like, what is the lawn? I mean, Americans, when they moved to the suburbs, the lawn became a very important thing for them. What a lot of people think it's like their outdoor living room. So, or that's one way, like we fill it with furniture. Or if you're from Baltimore, we fill it with plastic flamingos. But what it is it's like the public face of your family. And so a lot of people equate a lawn with like a public display of their wealth on one hand. Like I have a 5-acre plot, and 4.9 acres of that is perfect monoculture, fertilized, pesticided grass. That equals I'm rich somehow. Right? I mean, it's got to be. Otherwise, there wouldn't be so much of it. So one question is, like, why is it that the lawn is like the aesthetic standard that we're all trying to follow? Like,
they say the grass is always greener.
Well, but that expression comes from somewhere else. I mean, my theory is that it's because Americans, although we got our independence from England a long time ago, there seems to be this weird, hangover that we think the best form of landscaping is to have our lawns look like a British garden. Because, none of the plants that most people put in their yards are even native to the United States, let alone their actual bioregion. So you have a Japanese maple in your front yard. Why? Right? And now, not to get too into this, but turns out that a Japanese maple, nothing eats a Japanese maple. No insects, no birds, nothing. A Japanese maple looks good, but ecologically it's worthless. If you live in Maryland and you plant a white oak, for example, a white oak supports something like 500 different species. Right? Bugs love it, birds love it, squirrels love it, everybody loves it. So you have a choice. Japanese maple, white oak. 0 support, 500 species. Which one are you going to plant? Turns out that a white oak is a beautiful tree, and it happens to be native to Maryland. So when you're thinking about your lawn, the question is not just should I fertilize it, but the question is what does this space represent to you? What if the aesthetic standard was not monoculture grass, which, by the way, itself is not native to North America, but the standard was how many songbirds and hummingbirds and butterflies can I get per square yard in my yard? And what if you had 37 monarchs and your neighbor only had 25, and he was like, damn, I got to plant more native plants. Wouldn't that be an interesting turnaround?
What if our just put rocks everywhere.
Yeah, but birds can't eat rocks, right? Birds can't eat rocks. Neither can butterflies. So why not go find yourself a really smart, enlightened horticulture person or a nursery person or a plant person. Ask them, what should I plant here in Florida, wherever you live, that's native, and ask them that question, and they will happily sell you as much as you can afford. You know, the crazy thing about plants is, I don't know if you know this, and I don't know what the equivalents are down here, but in New York, the Hudson River is being choked by an invasive plant called purple loosestrife. It's a very beautiful plant. It grows in river banks and into the river, and it ends up choking. It grows really fast and ends up choking off the waterways, right? But it's really pretty. But it's really bad. But in New York, you can still go to a plant store and buy it. So you plant this pretty plant in your yard, and suddenly the seeds blow all over the place. They migrate to your nearest creek, and suddenly the creek is dead because of the purple loosestrife. So doesn't it stand to reason that you should basically ban purple loosestrife from being sold in plant stores? Now, the plant store guy has a right to make a profit, but he doesn't necessarily have the right to make a profit off something that's going to choke off the Hudson River. You know what I mean? So this is another, you're talking about little incremental steps. One thing you could do is go to your local plant store and say, what do you got that's native? And don't you think you should stock more stuff that's native? And I'm buying a lot of native stuff. And so would a lot of other people if you had more of it. Right? Those are like the little consumer choices that you can make that suddenly, I mean, there are plant stores all over Maryland now that are like focusing on native plants because this message is like loud and clear in the mid-Atlantic. Right? The native plant thing is big and growing. Yeah.
Every county in the United States has got a Master Gardener program,
Yep.
Extension Office. And here in Florida, they've got the Florida Friendly Movement and for native things. So that's through the University of Florida.
Great point. Master gardeners, your county extension offices, there are lots of places to get educated. And you know, you can't change what monoculture farmers are going to do about monarch butterflies in Nebraska, but you can do what you can do about your own yard. And you know what's a miracle? I mean, again, I don't know if monarchs show up in Florida, but they certainly show up in Maryland. You plant milkweed in your yard, you will get monarch butterflies. It's like you're planting monarchs. Like how they find it. I mean, I live on 1/8 of an acre right outside of the city of Baltimore, and I plant milkweed, and there they are, boom, every year. Monarch butterflies. Where are they coming from? Right? You want to plant butterflies? Plant milkweed, yeah. Yeah.
Yes, I worked on it. I wanted to add a comment on the plastic bottles. I worked on a project in California to bring plant-based plastic bottles across the country and replace the PET. And as we begin to do that, the technology is obviously there to do it. The barrier we ran into was that Coca-Cola and the Manufacturers Association went into an agreement that unless jobs were replaced and the complete industry of recycling had an overhaul, that this would not happen. Particularly because when you recycle PLA or plant-based plastic, if there's more than, I think it's a 10%, there's a 10% contamination rate that occurs with existing plastic, and the entire batch has to be thrown out rather than recycled. So that's why something is not quite as simple as we sometimes like to see it.
Thank you. And the industry is not making it any easier, that's for sure. Yeah, go ahead.
I just want to make people aware over here at the vendor booth. I have a water that will create water that you can use to do laundry in. And it's ionized water. And it has the same effect as using a soap. Love to show you at No Water Compares.
Great, thank you. I mean, you could probably also tell them about new ideas in municipal water treatment using some of this technology too. Like, the question is, how safe is the water coming out of your tap? You know, if you think about municipal water treatment, these big treatment plants were built 150 years ago with one goal in mind. It was to, stop babies from dying from things like cholera and dysentery. So what you do is you dump a bunch of chlorine in there, it kills all that stuff, and everybody's happy. So people in the United States no longer die of cholera and dysentery. But if you test the water that is coming out of a water treatment plant, you will still find pesticides and bisphenol A and DDT and the runoff from your suburban parking your parking lots, and weirdly, like pharmaceutical drugs. You know this? Have you read these stories, right? So they tested the water in every major city in the United States, and they found quantifiable amounts of, you name it, Viagra, antidepressants, hormone replacement therapy in the drinking water, post-treatment, right? The point is that they didn't have all these problems, these insults to drinking water 150 years ago. These are what you call like emergent problems. These are things that we've kind of created, and our technology for cleaning up our drinking water has not, at the municipal level, evolved fast enough. That's why companies are showing up to say, look, you want clean drinking water, we'll show you how to get it. The answer, by the way, is not in plastic water bottles. Because, I mean, you probably know this, but the water in those water bottles is even less regulated than the water coming out of your tap. Water coming out of your tap is regulated. The water coming out of your bottle is not regulated. Why? Because, obviously, you regulate water as in a bottle as a food and not as water. Right? So it's not subjected to the same federal laws about drinking water that your tap water is, because there's a huge market.